Turn around. Face the car. Now.
My hands are visible. I'm unarmed. Why am I being detained?
I don't owe you an explanation. Do it!
You approach me with a weapon drawn. State your reasonable suspicion.
Stop resisting!
I am not resisting. I'm asserting my Fourth Amendment rights.
Standing 15 feet away was Officer Kyle Braden. He looked young, maybe 27 years old, with a high and tight haircut that looked fresh and a uniform that looked too stiff, like he spent more time ironing it than working in it. His hand was hovering dangerously close to his service weapon, his fingers twitching with an adrenaline dump that he clearly didn't know how to control. Thorne saw the signs immediately, the dilated pupils, the sheen of sweat on the forehead, despite the mild weather, the aggressive bladed stance. This wasn't an officer in control of a situation. This was a boy playing soldier, and that made him dangerous. Thorne slowly removed his hand from the pump, leaving the nozzle in the tank, and raised his hands to shoulder height, palms open, fingers spread. He didn't speak immediately. He waited for the officer to breathe. "I'm stepping away from the vehicle, officer," Thorne said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that carried authority without needing volume. "My hands are visible. I am unarmed. I am simply pumping gas into my vehicle." Thorne wore a pressed polo shirt tucked into khakis, a leather belt, and loafers. He looked like exactly what he was, a retired grandfather taking his prized classic car out for a spin. But Officer Braden didn't see a grandfather. He didn't see the distinguished gray at Thorne's temples or the calm demeanor of a man who had led battalions. He saw a large black man in a muscle car that looked too expensive in a neighborhood Braden had decided he didn't belong in. "I didn't ask you what you were doing. I told you to get back," Braden shouted, taking a step closer, invading the reactionary gap. "Turn around and face the vehicle. Now." Thorne held his ground, his feet planted shoulder-width apart. He didn't turn around. Turning around meant losing sight of the threat, and right now Officer Braden was a threat. "Officer, I am complying with your order to keep my hands visible," Thorne stated, his eyes locking onto Braden's name tag. "However, I will not turn my back to you until you explain the nature of this contact. You have approached me with your weapon unholstered in a public place. What is your reasonable suspicion?" The question seemed to short-circuit something in Braden's mind. He wasn't used to suspects. That's what Thorne was to him, a suspect using legal terminology. He was used to fear. He was used to people begging or running. He wasn't prepared for a constitutional law lecture in the middle of a Chevron station. "You're resisting. I gave you a lawful order," Braden yelled, his voice cracking slightly. "We have a report of a vehicle matching this description involved in a felony. Now face the car, or I will make you face the car." Thorne knew immediately it was a lie, or at best a gross incompetence. His Chevelle was a rare restoration. There weren't two of them roaming Charleston committing felonies. But he also knew that arguing the facts on the side of the road was a good way to get shot. "I am not resisting, Officer Braden," Thorne said deliberately, using the man's name to humanize himself, a tactic he had used in negotiations overseas. "I am standing still. I am not reaching for anything, but I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. You are detaining me. I am asking you to articulate the specific crime you suspect me of committing. A vehicle matching this description is vague. What description? What make? What model? What license plate?" Thorne's hands remained steady, rock steady, while Braden's hand shook as he finally drew his taser, the yellow plastic gleaming in the sun. The red dot danced erratically on Thorne's chest. "I'm not going to play games with you," Braden screamed, the taser extended. "Get on the ground. Last warning, get on the ground, now." By now the commotion had drawn attention. A woman at Pump 4 had stopped filling her minivan and was recording with her phone. A man in a landscaping truck at the air pump had stepped out, phone raised. Braden saw the phones in his peripheral vision, and instead of calming him down, it made him desperate. He felt the eyes of the public, and he felt his authority slipping away. He needed to dominate the space. He needed to win. Thorne saw the escalation. He saw the finger tightening on the trigger of the taser. He knew that if he went to the ground, he would be vulnerable to a physical attack that his bad knees and back souvenirs from a helicopter crash in Afghanistan couldn't handle. "Officer," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of command he had used to brief generals. "Look at what you are doing. You are pointing a weapon at a senior citizen who is cooperating. You have no cover, officer. You have no probable cause. You are escalating a non-event into a use-of-force incident on camera. If you pull that trigger, you are violating federal law and department policy. Think about your next move very carefully." It was the most dangerous moment of the encounter. Thorne was betting his physical safety on the hope that a shred of rationality remained in the young officer's mind. But Braden was too far gone. The adrenaline loop had closed. He interpreted Thorne's calm reasoning as arrogance and his refusal to lie in the dirt as a threat. "That's it. You're under arrest for obstruction and resisting an officer." Braden holstered the taser and lunged forward, grabbing Thorne's left wrist and twisting it violently behind his back. Thorne didn't fight back. He didn't pull away. He allowed the momentum to turn him, using his own balance to keep from face-planting into the scorching metal of the Chevelle. He went rigid but compliant, employing a passive resistance that protected his joints while highlighting the officer's unnecessary aggression. "I am not resisting," Thorne said loudly for the benefit of the cameras now circling them. "I am allowing you to handcuff me. I am not fighting." Braden wasn't listening. He kicked Thorne's legs apart, roughly forcing him to bend over the trunk of the car. He jammed the handcuffs onto Thorne's wrists, tightening them until the metal bit into the skin, cutting off circulation. "Stop moving. Stop fighting." Braden was shouting commands for a fight that wasn't happening, panting as if he had just run a mile. He was performing for an audience that wasn't buying it. "You're done," Braden hissed in Thorne's ear as he double-locked the cuffs, shoving Thorne's face down toward the hot paint of the car. "You want to be a lawyer? You can be a lawyer in a cell." Thorne winced as his shoulder, the one that had required surgery after his second tour in Iraq, screamed in protest. But he kept his face impassive. He turned his head slightly to look Braden in the eye, or as close as he could get from his bent-over position. "Son," Thorne said, and the word hung heavy in the air, stripped of any warmth. "You have just made a mistake that you cannot undo. You have arrested a United States veteran without cause. You have used excessive force on a compliant subject, and you have done it all on video." Braden scoffed, grabbing Thorne by the upper arm and hauling him upright. "I don't care who you are. Save it for the judge." Braden marched Thorne toward the patrol car, a black and white SUV parked haphazardly at the pumps. The crowd was growing. "Why are you arresting him?" the woman with the minivan shouted. "He was just getting gas. He didn't do anything." Braden ignored her, shoving Thorne into the back seat of the cruiser. The space was cramped, the hard plastic seat unforgiving. Thorne had to contort his large frame to fit his knees pressing against the metal cage divider. Braden slammed the door with a force that shook the vehicle. Thorne sat in the sudden silence of the back seat, the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner filling his nose. He closed his eyes for a brief second, centering himself. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a waste of energy. He was focused. He was on a mission now. The mission was no longer about getting gas. It was about teaching a lesson in accountability that the city of Charleston would never forget. Officer Braden got into the driver's seat, breathing heavily. He picked up his radio. "Dispatch 1 Adam 121 in custody, resisting obstruction, transporting to central booking." He didn't call for a tow truck for the Chevelle. He left the vintage car sitting at the pump, unlocked window, down nozzle, still in the tank, a final act of pettiness and negligence. Thorne noted it. He noted everything. As the cruiser pulled out of the gas station, Thorne looked out the window at the citizens watching him go. They looked terrified. They looked angry. And Thorne knew that for every minute he sat in this car, the price the city would pay was going up. The drive to the station was only 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Braden didn't speak, but he kept glancing in the rearview mirror, perhaps expecting Thorne to be kicking the windows or screaming threats. Instead, Thorne sat in perfect stillness, staring straight ahead, his posture as erect as the handcuffs allowed. It was unnerving Braden. The silence in the car was heavier than the shouting match had been. Braden turned on the radio to drown out the quiet, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, even if his ego wouldn't let him water it yet. They arrived at the precinct, a brick fortress in the middle of downtown. Braden pulled into the sally port, the heavy garage doors rattling shut behind them, sealing them in the gloom of the police station. He hauled Thorne out of the car again, using unnecessary force, gripping his bicep tightly. "Let's go. Move it." They walked through the secure corridors, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Thorne walked with his head up. He had walked into enemy compounds with a bag over his head and maintained more dignity than this. He wasn't going to let a local booking room break him. They entered the processing area. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was a fixture of the department, a man in his late 50s with weary eyes and a mustache that had been out of style for 20 years. He had seen everything the city had to throw at him. He was reviewing paperwork when Braden shoved Thorne toward the counter. Miller looked up, his eyes scanning Thorne, the khakis, the polo, the expensive shoes, the calm demeanor, and then flicked to Braden, who looked flushed and messy. Miller's eyebrows knit together. He knew a contempt of cop arrest when he saw one. "What do we have here, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice tired. "Interfering, obstruction, resisting." Braden recited, rattling off the catch-all charges bad cops used when they had nothing else. Suspect refused to identify, refused to exit the vehicle initially, became belligerent. Miller looked at Thorne. "That true, sir. You were belligerent." Thorne met Miller's gaze. "Sergeant, I requested the officer articulate a reasonable suspicion for the stop. He could not. I was pumping gas. I never raised my voice. I never moved from my position until he put his hands on me." Miller sighed. He had heard this story before. "All right, let's get you processed. Uncuff him, Braden." Braden hesitated. "Sarge, he's a flight risk. He's combative." Miller slammed his hand on the desk. "He's a 60-year-old man in loafers, Braden. Take the damn cuffs off." Braden scowled, but complied, unlocking the handcuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists where deep red welts had already formed. He didn't complain. He simply reached for his back pocket. "Officer Braden has my wallet in his possession," Thorne said. "I would like to present my identification now, as I am securely inside a government facility." Braden tossed the leather wallet onto the counter with a sneer. "There. See if it's even real." Miller picked up the wallet. It was high-quality leather, worn smooth with age. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the driver's license. Marcus Elias Thorne. Valid. Clean. Then he flipped the flap. There was a military identification card. Not just any ID, but a retired officer's card. Rank Colonel. Miller paused. He looked up at Thorne, his posture straightening instinctively. "You served, sir?" Miller asked, his tone shifting. 24 years, Thorne replied. "Special Forces, 5th Group." Miller swallowed. He was a Marine vet himself. He knew what 5th Group meant. He flipped the wallet open further. Pinned to the leather inside was a miniature ribbon, a silver star with an oak leaf cluster. You didn't buy that at a surplus store. You earned that by bleeding. And behind it, tucked into a clear sleeve, was a business card. Heavy stock, gold embossed seal. It read, "Office of the Governor, Private Line." On the back, a handwritten note. "Marcus, call me any time. You have my eternal thanks." The air left the room. Sergeant Miller looked at the contents of the wallet, then at the bruised wrists of the man standing before him, and then at Officer Braden, who was leaning against the wall, looking bored. Miller's face went pale, then red. He closed the wallet slowly, treating it like an unexploded bomb. He looked at Braden with a mix of pity and fury. "Braden," Miller said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. Did you run the plates on his car before you approached him? I told you it matched a bolo, Braden said defensively. A black sedan involved in a robbery. Miller closed his eyes. A black sedan, he repeated. Braden, this gentleman drives a cherry-red Chevelle coupe. Braden blinked. Well, the light was hitting it weird, and he looked suspicious. He was loitering. Miller stood up slowly. You stopped a red coupe for a black sedan bolo, and you arrested a decorated colonel for asking you why. Braden's arrogance faltered for the first time. He refused to ID. Because you had no right to ask him. Miller roared, the sound echoing off the cinder block walls. You get the watch commander down here. Now do not pass go, do not collect $200. Get Captain Reynolds in here immediately. Braden took a step back, stunned by the outburst. Sarge, it's just a... Move, Miller screamed. Braden scrambled out of the room. Miller turned to Thorne, his face a mask of mortification. Colonel? Sir, I need you to have a seat. I am going to get you some water. I cannot apologize enough. Thorne didn't sit. He stood tall. Sergeant, I appreciate your courtesy, but we are past the point of apologies. I want the booking photos taken. I want the fingerprints taken. I want every step of this process documented, because when I sue this department, I don't want anyone claiming I was given special treatment after the fact. Book me. Miller looked at him, pleading silently. Sir, if we book you, it creates a record. We can unarrest you. It happens. We call it a detention and release. No, Thorne said firmly. Your officer arrested me. He put me in cuffs. He brought me here. He cited me. You will finish the process. I want my mugshot. I want the world to see what the Charleston Police Department does to veterans who dare to ask a question. Miller knew he couldn't win this. He nodded slowly, defeated. Yes, Colonel. Right this way. 10 minutes later, the door to the processing room flew open. Captain Reynolds strode in. He was a tall man, political, always thinking about the next press conference. But right now, he looked like a man who had just swallowed a box of nails. He had Officer Braden trailing behind him like a scolded puppy. Reynolds took one look at Thorne, who was currently wiping ink off his fingers onto a paper towel, and winced. Reynolds had met Thorne before. At a charity gala for wounded warriors 2 years ago. Thorne had been the keynote speaker. Reynolds remembered shaking his hand. Colonel Thorne, Reynolds said, rushing forward, hand extended. Marcus, my God, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Thorne didn't take the hand. He looked at it, then looked at Reynolds. Captain, it's not a misunderstanding. It is a series of deliberate choices made by your officer. Reynolds pulled his hand back, clearing his throat. We've reviewed the Bodycam footage on the way down, Colonel. It's problematic. Officer Braden was overzealous. We are going to release you immediately. No charges. The record will be expunged by the morning. We can have an officer drive you back to your car right now. My car, Thorne said, his voice ice cold, which is currently sitting unlocked at a gas pump in a high-traffic area with the keys in the ignition because your officer refused to secure it. That car. Reynolds paled. He whipped around to Braden. You left the vehicle unsecured. Braden looked at his boots. I was focused on the suspect, sir. Reynolds looked like he was going to have a stroke. He turned back to Thorne. We will dispatch a unit to secure it immediately. Please, Colonel, let's go to my office. We can resolve this. I am not going to your office, Captain, Thorne said. I am legally detained. I have been processed. I have been fingerprinted. My Fourth Amendment rights have been violated. My Eighth Amendment rights regarding cruel and unusual punishment are debatable given the tightness of these cuffs and the transport. I am not looking for a backroom deal. I am looking for the paperwork. Thorne stepped closer to the counter. I want a copy of the arrest report. I want a copy of the booking sheet. I want the incident number, and I want the badge number of Officer Braden written down on a piece of department letterhead. Colonel, please. Reynolds lowered his voice. If we make this official, it becomes public record. The press is already involved, Captain, Thorne interrupted. There were 5 people filming at the gas station. By the time I get home, I will be trending on Twitter. The only question is whether you want to be the department that tried to hide it, or the department that documented its own failure. Reynolds stared at Thorne. He realized then that he wasn't dealing with a victim. He was dealing with a tactician. Thorne had already outmaneuvered them, and he hadn't even made a phone call yet. Give him the paperwork, Sergeant. Reynolds whispered, defeated. He turned to Braden. Give me your badge and your gun. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Go wait in the conference room. Braden looked up, shock written all over his face. Captain? For a stop? For being an idiot, Braden? Reynolds snapped. Give them to me. Braden slowly unholstered his weapon and unpinned his badge, placing them on the counter next to Thorne's wallet. The symbolism was striking. The badge of the rookie next to the silver star of the veteran. Thorne took his paperwork. He checked it for accuracy. He retrieved his wallet and his belt. He put his belt back on, slowly looping it through the khakis with deliberate motions. He checked his shoelaces. Then he looked at Reynolds. I am free to go. Yes, sir. You are free to go. I'll be taking an Uber, Thorne said. Do not send a squad car. I don't want to be seen in one of your vehicles again. He walked out of the processing room into the lobby and out the front doors into the late afternoon sun. He took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. But the war wasn't over. It had just begun. Thorne arrived at his home in the historic district at 5:30 p.m. His wife, Sarah, was waiting on the porch. She had already seen the video. A neighbor had sent it to her. She didn't say a word as he walked up the steps. She just hugged him, holding him tight, shaking slightly. I'm okay, Sarah, he whispered into her hair. I'm okay. She pulled back her eyes, fierce. They put hands on you, Marcus. They treated you like a criminal. I know, he said, and they are going to wish they hadn't. He went into his study, a room lined with books on military history and law. He sat at his mahogany desk and picked up the phone. He didn't call a criminal defense lawyer. He didn't need one. The charges were a joke. He called David Sterling. Sterling was the toughest civil rights litigator in the Southeast, a man who had sued the Department of Corrections and won millions. David, Thorne said when the line picked up. It's Marcus. I have a job for you. I saw the video, Marcus, Sterling said, his voice grim. I was just about to call you. Are you hurt? Wrists are bruised. Shoulder is sore. Pride is intact, Thorne said. I want a file, and I don't want to settle for an apology. We're not going to settle for an apology, Sterling said. We're going to file a 1983 federal civil rights lawsuit. Unlawful seizure, excessive force, false arrest, racial profiling, failure to intervene, failure to train. We're going to name Braden individually. We're going to name the chief. We're going to name the city. We're going to depose everyone from the dispatcher to the mayor. Thorne leaned back in his chair. Good. I want the filing ready by Thursday morning. It'll be ready tomorrow, Sterling promised. By Wednesday morning, the story was national news. Veteran arrested for pumping gas was the headline on CNN. Fox News ran with Hero Humiliated. The video of Braden screaming at a calm elderly man was played on a loop. The contrast was visually devastating, the aggressive, frantic youth versus the stoic, dignified elder. The internet detectives had gone to work. Within hours, they had found Braden's high school yearbook photos, his previous complaints, his social media posts which contained questionable memes about cracking skulls. The city attorney, Elena Rodriguez, sat in the mayor's office with her head in her hands. "It's indefensible, Mr. Mayor," she said. "I've watched the body cam. Braden lies about the bolo. He lies about the resistance. He escalates immediately. And the victim, God help us, the victim is practically a saint in this community. He runs the Toys for Tots drive. He sits on the library board. If this goes to a jury, they will give him the keys to the city and your pension." The mayor, a man who prided himself on being tough on crime, looked sick. "Can we offer him $100,000? "He doesn't want money, sir," Rodriguez said. "His lawyer called. They are filing suit tomorrow. They aren't asking for a number. They are asking for a consent decree. They want federal oversight of our hiring practices. They want Braden fired, not suspended, and they are going to get it." The phone on the mayor's desk rang. It was the governor. The mayor stared at it. "I think you better answer that," Rodriguez whispered. The internal investigation was the fastest in the department's history. Usually these things took months. This one took 4 days. The investigators pulled Braden's file. They found a pattern. Over his 3 years on the force, Braden had stopped 400 cars. 85% of the drivers were black or Hispanic. In 60% of those stops, he listed furtive movements or suspicious behavior as the reason for the search. But he had only found contraband twice. It was a clear statistical roadmap of racial profiling. His supervisors had signed off on every report, ignoring the data because Braden was active and producing numbers. Now those numbers were a noose around the department's neck. The investigators interviewed the dispatcher who confirmed she had broadcast a bolo for a black 2015 Honda Accord with a partial plate. She testified that she had no idea how Braden got red 1969 Chevelle out of that. The interview with Braden was a disaster. He was defensive, blaming Thorne for disrespecting his authority. He couldn't explain why he felt threatened by a man standing still. He couldn't explain why he didn't check the license plate. When shown the photo of Thorne's bruised wrists, Braden shrugged. He shouldn't have flexed, he said. It was the final nail in his coffin. On Friday, the police chief held a press conference. He stood alone at the podium. "The actions of Officer Kyle Braden do not reflect the values of this department." He began the standard line, sounding hollower than usual. "Effective immediately, Officer Braden's employment has been terminated for cause. We are also initiating a department-wide review of our stop and frisk policies." He didn't take questions. He couldn't. The settlement came 3 weeks later. The city didn't want to go to discovery. They didn't want Thorne's lawyers digging through 5 years of emails. They offered $1.5 million. Thorne accepted, but with conditions. The city had to publicly apologize. The department had to implement mandatory de-escalation training led by outside experts. And the video of his arrest would be used as a training tool for what not to do. Thorne took the $1.5 million and didn't spend a dime on himself. He established the Thorne Legal Defense Fund for veterans. Its sole purpose was to provide top-tier legal representation for veterans who were mistreated by police. He hired David Sterling to run it. "We fought for this country," Thorne told the local paper. "We shouldn't have to fight our own government when we come home." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus Thorne pulled his red Chevelle into the same Chevron station. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. He got out of the car. He looked at Pump 4. He remembered the feeling of the cold steel on his wrists. He remembered the anger. But the anger was gone now, replaced by a quiet resolve. He picked up the nozzle and began to pump gas. A patrol car rolled by slowly on the main road. The officer inside a new recruit looked over at the gas station. He saw the black man and the red car. He saw the man looking back at him. The officer nodded respectfully. Thorne nodded back. He finished pumping the gas. He wiped a speck of dust off the fender. He got back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep American rumble that shook the ground. Thorne put the car in gear and pulled out onto the road, driving slowly, obeying the speed limit. A free man in a free country, knowing that freedom wasn't given. It was defended sometimes on a battlefield and sometimes in a gas station parking lot. But as he drove, he couldn't help but look in the rearview mirror, checking, always checking. Because he knew that for others who didn't have his rank, his ribbons, or his resources, the ending might have been very different. And that was a war that was still being fought. What would you have done if you were in Colonel Thorne's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that our veterans deserve better than this, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. The end.